At my son's funeral, his wife handed me a cardboard box and said, "Your stuff is already packed. The Uber's waiting outside." I'm Harold Bennett. I'm 68 years old. And what happened over the next 72 hours proved that assumptions are the most expensive mistakes anyone can make. Picture this. You're standing next to your only child's casket. The flowers smell too sweet. The organ music is playing something you don't recognize. And before the last guest has even left the chapel, your daughter-in-law is telling you that you have until sundown to vacate the premises. She called me a financial drain on the family, a burden that Ryan had been carrying for too long. She said I should be grateful she was giving me 6 hours instead of calling the sheriff. But here's what my daughter-in-law didn't know. The house she was throwing me out of? I designed the blueprints myself in 1991. The money she thought she was inheriting? $2.3 million in patents and rental income. All mine. The retirement fund she assumed Ryan had been building? Every penny came from accounts she'd never seen. For 11 years, she'd lived under my roof, eating food I paid for, while treating me like I was lucky to have a bed. Instead of correcting her at the funeral, I picked up that cardboard box, walked to the Uber, and smiled. Sometimes the truth is more powerful when you let people discover it themselves. If you're new to this channel, hit subscribe. I share stories about dignity, respect, and the quiet strength that changes everything. And trust me, you'll want to hear what my daughter-in-law found waiting on her doorstep exactly 3 days later. Let me start from the beginning. The warning signs were there from the moment my son brought her home. I just loved him too much to say anything. Ryan was 31 when he met Melissa at a tech conference in San Francisco. She was a marketing director for a software startup. Ambitious, beautiful, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately calculated who was worth talking to. I wasn't worth talking to. At their first dinner at my house, Melissa spent the entire meal on her phone. When Ryan tried to show her my workshop in the garage, she glanced at the door and said, "That's nice, babe. Can we go? I have an early flight." She never asked what I did for a living, never asked about the framed patents on my office wall, never wondered why a retired old man lived in a 4,000 square foot house in Scottsdale with a view of Camelback Mountain. She saw what she expected to see, an aging widower in khaki pants and a faded polo shirt, a father who needed his successful son to check in on him, a leftover from a previous generation who didn't understand modern life. Ryan tried to explain once. "Dad's not what you think, Mel. He worked at Boeing for 30 years. He designed the—" "I'm sure he did great work," she interrupted. "Can we talk about the wedding venue?" I watched that exchange from the kitchen doorway. Ryan caught my eye and shrugged apologetically. I just smiled and went back to making coffee. Some battles aren't worth fighting, and some truths aren't worth forcing on people who've already made up their minds. The wedding was beautiful. I paid for it, of course. $87,000 for a ceremony at the Phoenician Resort. When Melissa's father asked who was covering the bill, Ryan said it was a gift from family savings. I didn't correct him. At the reception, Melissa's mother cornered me by the bar. "You must be so proud of Ryan," she said, her voice dripping with the specific condescension reserved for people she considered beneath her. "It's wonderful that he's done so well for himself. I'm sure having a successful son takes some pressure off, doesn't it? At your age, I mean." "I manage," I said. "Melissa mentioned you're on a fixed income. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. We believe in taking care of family." I looked at this woman in her designer dress, drinking champagne that I'd paid for, offering me charity in my own son's wedding venue that I'd funded entirely, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. "Amusement. That's very kind," I said. "I'll keep that in mind." Ryan and Melissa moved in with me after the honeymoon. "Just temporarily," Melissa assured everyone. "Just until we find the right property." 11 years later, they were still there. I didn't mind having Ryan close. After his mother passed in 2008, this house felt too empty anyway. Margaret and I had built it together, literally built it. I drew the plans. She picked the finishes. We hired contractors and supervised every nail, every wire, every pipe. Her absence echoed in every room. Having Ryan back helped fill that silence. even if it meant tolerating Melissa's casual dismissiveness, even if it meant being treated like a house guest in my own home. The arrangement worked well enough. Ryan ran his cybersecurity consulting firm from the home office. Melissa climbed the corporate ladder at various tech companies. I puttered in my workshop, collected rent from my 4 properties downtown, and deposited royalty checks from Boeing every quarter. Nobody asked where the money came from. Melissa assumed Ryan earned it. Ryan knew the truth but never corrected her, and I never offered information to someone who'd made clear she didn't want it. Then, 8 weeks ago, everything changed. Ryan was driving back from a client meeting in Tucson when a semi-truck ran a red light. The highway patrol officer said he didn't suffer. The impact was too fast, too complete, for suffering. Cold comfort for a father identifying his son's body. The days after Ryan's death blurred together. Phone calls, paperwork. The machinery of death grinding forward while I stood paralyzed by grief. Melissa took charge immediately. She called the funeral home. She selected the casket. She chose the music, the flowers, the readings. She handled everything with the efficiency of someone managing a product launch rather than mourning a husband. "Don't worry about any of this," she told me the day after Ryan died. "I've got it handled. You just focus on, I don't know, resting. Resting. Like I was recovering from a cold instead of losing my only child." At the funeral home, I suggested we include Ryan's favorite song in the service, Dreams, by Fleetwood Mac. We used to play it on road trips when he was a boy, windows down, both of us singing off-key. Melissa wrinkled her nose. "That's so old, and honestly, a little depressing. I'm thinking something more contemporary. Maybe something acoustic that'll photograph well for the service video." Photograph well? She was already planning the Instagram post. I let it go. This was her husband too. She had a right to grieve in her own way. But at the service itself, I realized Melissa wasn't grieving at all. She was repositioning. I watched her work the room in her tailored black dress, shaking hands with Ryan's business contacts, collecting business cards from people she'd never met, networking at her own husband's funeral. "Ryan always spoke so highly of you," I heard her tell his biggest client, a man named Patterson who ran a defense contractor. "I'd love to continue that relationship. Maybe we could have lunch next week?" I sat in the front pew next to Margaret's sister, my Aunt Dorothy, and felt invisible. After the burial, everyone came back to the house. My house. Melissa had hired caterers without asking me, rearranged the furniture without telling me, removed Margaret's photos from the living room mantel. "Temporary," she said when I noticed. "For the reception, too depressing to have dead people staring at guests." Dead people. Like Margaret was a decoration that clashed with the catering. I was getting a drink in the kitchen when Melissa cornered me by the refrigerator. "Harold, we need to discuss something." I waited. "This living situation. It's not sustainable anymore." "What do you mean?" She sighed like I was a slow child who needed extra explanation. "Ryan was supporting you, Harold, paying for your food, your medications, your share of the utilities. With him gone," she spread her hands, "I can't carry that burden alone." Burden? That word landed like a punch. "I see," I said. "It's nothing personal. But this house is mine now, and I need to think about my future. I'm sure Ryan would have wanted you to be independent." Independent. There are some wonderful senior communities in Mesa. Affordable ones. Some of them even have activities and meal plans. You'd probably enjoy it. I stared at this woman who'd lived in my home for 11 years, eaten meals I'd prepared, slept under a roof I'd built, and was now suggesting I relocate to a facility in Mesa. "How long do I have?" I asked. She seemed surprised by the question, like she'd expected more resistance. "I'm not unreasonable, Harold. Take a week to find a place. I'll even help you pack." 1 week. To erase 68 years of life. I nodded slowly and walked back to the living room. I could feel her watching me, probably relieved that the difficult conversation had gone so smoothly. She had no idea. The thing about assumptions is they feel like facts until they don't. Melissa assumed Ryan owned this house because he'd lived here most of his life. She assumed Ryan's consulting income paid the mortgage because the money always seemed available. She assumed I was a retiree living on Social Security because I dressed simply, drove a 10-year-old truck, and never talked about money. She never once considered that she might be wrong about everything. That night, after the last guest left and Melissa retreated to her bedroom, I went down to my workshop in the garage. Behind the workbenches, hidden by a rolling tool cabinet, was a fireproof safe I'd installed in 1992. I spun the combination, opened the door, and looked at the documents that would change everything. First, the deed to 4,417 Mountain View Drive, purchased the 15th of October, 1991. Owner, Harold James Bennett. No co-signers, no mortgage. Paid in full with cash from my Boeing retirement buyout. Second, a folder of property tax receipts going back 32 years. All paid by Harold James Bennett. Every single one. Third, the rental property portfolio. 4 buildings downtown Phoenix, 12 units total. Current market value, $1.4 million. Monthly income, $14,000 after expenses. Fourth, the patent licensing agreements. 3 patents for aerospace guidance systems I'd developed at Boeing. Licensed to 4 different contractors. Annual royalty income, approximately $300,000. And fifth, the document Melissa definitely didn't know about. Ryan's life insurance policy. $1.2 million. Beneficiary, the Harold and Margaret Bennett Family Trust. Not Melissa, the trust, which meant me. I sat on my workshop stool, surrounded by the tools I'd collected over decades, and did the math. Melissa thought she was inheriting a house worth maybe $800,000 and a husband's retirement savings. She was already spending that money in her head, already planning renovations and lifestyle upgrades. In reality, she was inheriting nothing. The house was mine. The rental income was mine. The patent royalties were mine. Even Ryan's life insurance was mine, because Ryan had listed the family trust as his beneficiary when he was 22 years old, and never changed it. Ryan knew the truth about our finances, of course. He knew I'd been supporting him, not the other way around. He knew the consulting business, while successful, wasn't nearly as profitable as Melissa assumed. He knew every family dinner, every vacation, every major purchase had been quietly subsidized by the trust. But he'd never told Melissa. That was between Ryan and his wife, their communication, their marriage. I never understood why he kept her in the dark, but I respected his decision. Now, sitting in my workshop after his funeral, I realized that decision had created an explosive situation. Melissa was about to discover that her entire understanding of the last 11 years was backwards. That she'd been the dependent one, not me. That the charity she thought she was extending was actually charity she'd been receiving. The question was how she would react to that discovery, and more importantly, how I would deliver it. I thought about calling her downstairs right then, showing her the documents, watching her face as the truth sank in. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she'd called me a burden in my own kitchen. Maybe it was the cardboard box she'd shoved at me before the funeral flowers had even wilted. Maybe it was 11 years of being treated like furniture. Or maybe I just wanted to see how far she would go. Some lessons only stick when people teach them to themselves. The next morning, Melissa was already on the phone when I came upstairs. I could hear her in what used to be Ryan's office, the office in my house that she'd apparently claimed as her own. Yes, I'm looking for an expedited appraisal. The property is in Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, pool. I need to know the value for estate purposes. Estate purposes. She was already calculating her inheritance. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Margaret and I had eaten breakfast for 23 years. The same table where I'd helped Ryan with homework, celebrated birthdays, mourned losses. Melissa emerged 30 minutes later, still in her robe, holding a tablet. Harold, good, you're up. We need to go over some things. She sat across from me without asking if I wanted company. I've been reviewing Ryan's accounts, she said, scrolling through something on her screen. And frankly, I'm confused about the finances. Confused how? Well, his checking account only has about $12,000 in it, and his investment portfolio is much smaller than I expected. She looked at me like I might have answers, which I did, but wasn't offering. What were you expecting? I asked. More. A lot more. Ryan made good money. Where did it all go? I sipped my coffee. Harold, I'm asking you a question. I heard you. Her eyes narrowed. Did Ryan have other accounts I don't know about? Offshore something? Crypto? You'd have to ask his financial advisor. Who is his financial advisor? The family has used Franklin and Associates in downtown Phoenix for 40 years. She typed something into her tablet. Fine, I'll call them today. Good luck with that, I thought. Franklin and Associates had managed the Bennett Family Trust since 1985. They'd worked with my father before me. They weren't about to share confidential information with anyone who wasn't on the account. In the meantime, Melissa continued, we need to discuss the house. What about it? I'm meeting with a real estate agent tomorrow, just to get a sense of the market. Scottsdale properties are moving fast right now. I set down my coffee cup. You're selling the house? Eventually, yes. I can't stay here alone, Harold. Too many memories. And honestly, the property taxes alone are probably more than your entire Social Security check. There it was again. The assumption that I was living on Social Security. The certainty that I couldn't possibly afford anything. Where would I go? I asked. Not because I needed her answer, but because I wanted to hear her say it. Mesa, like I mentioned. Or Tempe. Some of those senior communities are actually quite nice. They have buses that take residents to doctor appointments and grocery stores. You wouldn't even need to drive anymore. Buses to doctor appointments. Like I was already incapacitated. And if I don't want to move to Mesa? Melissa's face hardened. Harold, let me be clear. This is my house now. Ryan left everything to me. I understand you're attached to this place, but sentimentality doesn't pay the bills. You're sure about that? About Ryan leaving everything to you? Of course I'm sure. I'm his wife. That's how inheritance works. Have you seen the will? She hesitated. Just for a moment, but I caught it. Ryan's attorney is sending a copy next week, but I already know what it says. We discussed it. When? What? When did you discuss Ryan's will? I don't remember exactly. A few years ago. Why does it matter? I stood up and carried my coffee cup to the sink. Just curious. Harold. Her voice had a warning edge now. What are you implying? Nothing. I'm not implying anything. Good. Because I don't appreciate your tone. I'm trying to handle a difficult situation with dignity, and your passive-aggressive attitude isn't helping. Dignity. That was an interesting word choice from someone who'd handed me a cardboard box at her husband's funeral. I apologize, I said. Grief affects people differently. She nodded curtly and returned to her tablet. Your deadline is still Saturday. I expect you to be out by then. Understood. I went back to my workshop and started making phone calls. By Thursday afternoon, I had everything in order. My attorney, Marcus Chen, had prepared a complete package documenting my ownership of every asset Melissa thought she was inheriting. The property deed, the rental portfolio records, the patent licensing agreements, the trust documents showing Ryan as a beneficiary, not an owner. Harold, Marcus said over the phone, I have to ask, why didn't you correct this situation years ago? It wasn't my place. She's been treating you like a charity case in your own house. That's between her and her conscience. Marcus was quiet for a moment. And now? Now she's trying to throw me out of my home. Now she's making claims about assets that were never hers. Now she's spreading lies about my financial situation to anyone who'll listen. What lies? Melissa told Ryan's business partner that I've been bleeding the family dry for years. That Ryan's company would have been twice as successful if he hadn't been supporting his deadbeat father. Marcus whistled softly. That's defamation. That's Melissa. What do you want to do? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Part of me wanted to expose her immediately. Walk upstairs with the documents, spread them across the kitchen table, watch her face as she realized exactly how wrong she'd been. But another part of me remembered something Margaret used to say. The truth has its own timing, Harold. Don't rush it. I want to give her one more chance, I said. One opportunity to treat me with respect before she learns the truth. And if she doesn't, then she learns the truth anyway. But the hard way. When? This weekend. Before her deadline expires. That evening, Melissa had guests over. 3 women from her tennis club, all dressed in that expensive casual way that says, I have money, but I'm not trying too hard. I was in the living room reading when they arrived. Melissa barely acknowledged me as she led them through the house. The kitchen needs updating, she was saying, but the bones are good. I'm thinking white marble countertops, maybe gold fixtures. Gold fixtures. In the kitchen Margaret and I had designed together in 1990. One of the women noticed me and smiled politely. "Oh, is this Ryan's father?" "Harold," Melissa said, her voice somehow making my name sound insignificant. "He's been staying here temporarily. He'll be relocating soon." Relocating. Like I was a houseplant she was rehoming. "That must be difficult," the woman said to me. "Losing your son and having to move at the same time." "It has its challenges," I said. "Harold's very resilient," Melissa said quickly. "He's from that generation, you know. They don't complain like people do now." That generation. Like I was a museum exhibit. "Do you have family nearby?" another woman asked. Before I could answer, Melissa cut in. "He has a sister in Florida. We're exploring options in that area, somewhere more appropriate for his needs." His needs? Like I was an invalid who needed specialized care. "What were your needs before?" the first woman asked, seemingly genuine. I smiled. "Well, I spent 30 years as an aerospace engineer at Boeing, designed guidance systems for satellites. These days, I mostly read and manage some rental properties I own downtown." The room went slightly still. Melissa's tennis friends looked confused. "Aerospace engineer? Rental properties?" Melissa laughed, a brittle sound. "Harold's memory gets a little creative sometimes. He worked at Boeing, yes, but in maintenance. And the rental properties are a timeshare he bought in the 90s. I met her eyes. She stared back, daring me to contradict her. I could have pulled out my phone right then, shown them the patent certificates with my name on them, the rental income statements, the Boeing retirement package that had made me a millionaire at 55. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded and returned to my book. Let her have her moment. Let her friends believe whatever story she was selling. The truth would arrive soon enough. Friday morning, Melissa brought reinforcements. I was having breakfast when she walked in with a man in a suit. Tall, gray-templed, carrying a leather briefcase. "Harold, this is Vincent Reeves. He's a probate attorney. I've asked him to help expedite Ryan's estate settlement." Vincent extended his hand. "Mr. Bennett, my condolences for your loss." "Thank you." Melissa gestured for Vincent to sit at the kitchen table. My kitchen table. She didn't offer me a choice about participating in whatever meeting this was. "Vincent has reviewed Ryan's will," Melissa said. "He can explain the legal situation." Vincent opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. "It's relatively straightforward. Ryan's will leaves his personal property and any assets in his name to his surviving spouse. Standard language. Personal property," I repeated. "Correct. Clothing, vehicles, any accounts or investments titled in his name alone or jointly with Mrs. Bennett." "What about the house?" Vincent glanced at Melissa, then back at me. "That's actually why I'm here, Mr. Bennett. There seems to be some confusion about the property." "What kind of confusion?" "Mrs. Bennett indicated that you might have a sentimental claim to the residence, that you've been living here as Ryan's dependent and might resist relocation." "A sentimental claim. Like my ownership was a feeling rather than a legal fact." "Is that what she indicated?" Melissa jumped in. "I'm not trying to be harsh, Harold, but Vincent needs to understand the situation. You can't afford to maintain this property alone. You can barely afford groceries without Ryan's support." I looked at Vincent. "Has anyone examined the deed to this house?" Vincent's expression flickered. "I assumed." "You assumed what?" "That Ryan held the title, given that he's lived here for most of his adult life." "And you made that assumption based on what evidence?" Melissa stood up abruptly. "Harold, stop playing games. We all know Ryan inherited this house when his mother died. That's how you've been able to live here for free all these years." "Is that what Ryan told you?" "He didn't have to tell me. It's obvious." "Is it?" I turned to Vincent. "Counselor, as a probate attorney, would you advise your client to make claims about inherited property without examining the original deed?" Vincent was looking uncomfortable now. "Well, no. Standard practice would be to verify." "Verify what?" Melissa interrupted. There's nothing to verify. This is Ryan's house. It's always been Ryan's house. Actually, I said, standing up slowly, it's always been mine. The room went silent. What are you talking about? Melissa's voice had a thin edge now. This house was never in Ryan's name. It was never in Margaret's name. It's been titled to Harold James Bennett since the 15th of October 1991. I designed it, I built it, I paid for it, and I've owned it continuously for 33 years. Melissa laughed. That's ridiculous, Ryan told me. Ryan told you what, exactly? She hesitated. He said, he implied. Did Ryan ever explicitly state that he owned this house? Did he ever show you a deed with his name on it? Did he ever make a mortgage payment in front of you? The silence stretched. Vincent cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennett, perhaps we should verify the property records before proceeding. This is insane, Melissa said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. Harold's an old man on a fixed income. He can't afford property taxes on a house like this. Ryan was covering everything. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept my files. Pulled out a folder I'd prepared the night before. $327,000, I said. That's what I've paid in property taxes on this address since 1991. Here are the receipts. I spread the papers on the table. Melissa stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. That's not possible. Where would you get that kind of money? From my Boeing pension? From my patent royalties? From my rental properties? What rental properties? The 4 buildings I own downtown, 12 units total. They generate about $14,000 a month after expenses. Vincent was flipping through the receipts. His expression had shifted from skeptical to something else entirely. And the patent royalties? 3 aerospace guidance systems I developed in the 80s, still licensed to several defense contractors. About $300,000 a year. Melissa shook her head. No, this doesn't make sense. If you had all this money, why would you live so simply? Why would you drive that old truck? Why would you let Ryan pay for everything? Ryan didn't pay for anything, Melissa. I did. She went pale. The consulting business? I funded the startup costs. The wedding? $87,000 from my account. The cars Ryan drove? Gifts from me. Even this meeting with Mr. Reeves, I guarantee Ryan's estate is paying for it with money that originally came from the family trust. Family trust? I pulled out one more document, the one I'd been saving. The Harold and Margaret Bennett Family Trust, established 1985. Current value, approximately $2.3 million. Ryan was a beneficiary during his lifetime. He received regular distributions for education, housing assistance, and family support. I slid the paper across the table. Distributions that you assumed were coming from Ryan's business income. Distributions that funded the lifestyle you thought Ryan had earned. Melissa's hands were shaking as she picked up the document. Vincent was reading over her shoulder. This can't be right, she whispered. It's right. But if Ryan never owned anything, if all the money came from you, then you haven't inherited what you thought you inherited. Vincent set down the papers. Mrs. Bennett, I think we need to pause this meeting. There appear to be significant facts that weren't disclosed during our initial consultation. Melissa's face cycled through shock, confusion, and finally settled on anger. You did this on purpose, she said to me. You let me believe. I never told you anything about my finances. You never asked. You assumed. You could have corrected me at any time. I could have. But would you have listened? She had no answer for that. For 11 years, I continued, you've lived in my house, eaten food I paid for, benefited from money I provided, and treated me like I was lucky to have a room. Not once did you ask how the bills got paid. Not once did you wonder where the money came from. You just assumed Ryan handled it, because it fit your story about who we both were. Ryan should have told me. That's between you and Ryan. But you're right, he should have. Melissa looked around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. So this house is mine, and the life insurance. I pulled out the final paper. The beneficiary of Ryan's life insurance policy is the family trust, which means the beneficiary is me. She stared at the policy. $1.2 million. Her name appeared nowhere on the document. "You need to leave," she said quietly. "This is my house. I meant me. I need to leave." She stood up, knocking her chair backward. Vincent was already gathering his papers. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, "I strongly advise you to retain separate counsel before making any further decisions. It appears there may be significant estate issues that require careful analysis." Melissa wasn't listening. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before. Not anger, not contempt, fear. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you known I was wrong about everything? From the beginning. And you just let me? You never gave me a reason to correct you. Every time I tried to contribute to a conversation, you cut me off. Every time Ryan mentioned my background, you changed the subject. You didn't want to know who I was. You wanted to believe who you'd already decided I was." Melissa gathered her purse and walked toward the door. Vincent followed, looking relieved to escape. At the threshold, she turned back. "What happens now? Now you have the same opportunity you gave me. 1 week to figure out your living situation." 1 week? "I'm not unreasonable. Take time to find a place. I'll even help you pack." The irony wasn't lost on her. I watched her face as she recognized her own words being returned to her. "Harold, I'm sorry. I know. I was wrong about everything. I know that too." She left without another word. Vincent paused at the door. "Mr. Bennet, for what it's worth, I apologize. I should have verified the facts before taking this meeting. You were given bad information. Still, basic due diligence." He shook his head. "She seemed so certain. Certainty isn't the same as truth, counselor. Some people learn that lesson early. Some people learn it late. And some people never learn it at all." "That's true too." The house was quiet after they left. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by decades of memories, and thought about what came next. Part of me felt satisfied, vindicated. After 11 years of disrespect, Melissa finally understood the truth. But another part of me felt something unexpected. Sadness. Ryan had kept secrets from his wife, big secrets that affected their entire marriage. I'd never understood why he didn't tell her about the family finances, why he let her believe he was wealthier than he was, why he maintained a fiction that required treating his father like a charity case. Maybe he was ashamed to admit he needed help. Maybe he was afraid of how Melissa would react. Maybe he just never found the right moment. Whatever the reason, his silence had created this mess. And now he was gone, leaving me to clean it up. I made coffee and called my lawyer. By Monday, the story had spread through our entire social network. I didn't spread it. I didn't have to. Vincent Reeves apparently mentioned the situation to a colleague, who mentioned it to someone else, and within 72 hours, everyone who'd attended Ryan's funeral knew that Melissa had tried to evict the actual owner of the house. Helen Martinez, our neighbor for 20 years, came over with a casserole and curiosity. "Harold, is it true? She really thought she inherited everything?" She made assumptions. "But how? You built this house. Everyone knows that. Everyone knew it 20 years ago. The newer neighbors, Melissa's friends, the business contacts Ryan cultivated, they only knew what they saw. And what they saw was an old man in simple clothes driving an old truck." Helen shook her head. "Assumptions. The most expensive kind. What's going to happen to her? I don't know. That's not really my concern anymore." But it became my concern 2 days later when Melissa's mother called. "Mr. Bennet, I think we need to talk." I recognized her voice from the wedding. The woman who'd offered me charity while drinking champagne I'd paid for. "What about this situation with Melissa? There's clearly been a misunderstanding." "Was there?" "She's devastated. She had no idea about your financial situation. Ryan never told her." "I'm aware. And now she has nowhere to go. Her credit is tied up in accounts she can't access. She can't afford first and last month's rent anywhere." "That's unfortunate." Silence on the other end. "Mr. Bennet, I'm asking you to show some compassion. Melissa made mistakes, but she's not a bad person. She trusted her husband. She believed what he allowed her to believe." I thought about that. It was true, in a way. Melissa's crimes were assumptions and arrogance, not malice. She'd treated me badly, but she'd treated me the way she genuinely thought I deserved to be treated. Would she have acted differently if she'd known the truth? Probably. She would have been solicitous and respectful, bringing me coffee and asking about my health, not because she cared, but because she understood the financial implications. Was that better or worse than honest contempt? I genuinely wasn't sure. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Give her more time. 2 months instead of 1 week. Let her get on her feet. And maybe help her transition. She doesn't have skills for this kind of situation. She's always had safety nets. Safety nets she thought I didn't have. Safety nets she was willing to remove from me without a second thought." "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I'm asking." After I hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time. The same workshop where I'd looked at those documents after Ryan's funeral. The same workshop where I'd made the decision to let Melissa discover the truth on her own. Had I handled this correctly? I could have stopped the whole thing at the funeral. One sentence. "This is my house." Melissa would have prevented everything that followed. No fake deadlines, no probate attorney, no public humiliation. But it also wouldn't have changed anything fundamental. Melissa would still have been the person who treated me like a burden for 11 years. She just would have been polite about it. Was politeness enough? Was respect that only came from financial awareness actually respect at all? I didn't have answers. I just had questions, and a house full of memories, and a son I would never see again. The next Saturday, exactly 2 weeks after the funeral, Melissa came to collect her things. She arrived alone, driving a rental car. I watched from the window as she walked up the driveway she'd planned to own. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hi, Harold." "Melissa. I'm here for my clothes, and some of Ryan's things, if that's okay." "Of course." We walked through the house in silence. She packed methodically, taking only what was clearly hers. None of Ryan's engineering books. None of the furniture we'd accumulated together. Just clothes, jewelry, and a few framed photos. In the guest room she'd shared with Ryan, she paused at the window. "I loved him," she said quietly. "Whatever you think of me, I did love him. I believe you. I thought I understood our life. I thought I knew who we were, how we fit together, where the money came from and where it went. Ryan let me believe that. For 11 years, he let me build an entire worldview on a foundation that didn't exist. That must be difficult." "It is." She turned to face me. "But it doesn't excuse how I treated you. I was cruel, Harold. I called you a burden at your son's funeral. I tried to throw you out of your own house. I told people you were senile and financially incompetent. Yes. Why didn't you stop me?" I thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated. Because stopping you wouldn't have changed you. It would have just changed your behavior. You would have been nice to me because you knew I had money, not because you believed I deserved respect. Is that worse? I don't know. Maybe not. But I wanted to know who you really were. And the only way to know that was to let you show me. She nodded slowly. "And now you know." "Now I know. I'm not a good person, am I? You're a person who made assumptions and acted on them. Most people do that. You just had the bad luck to be catastrophically wrong." She almost smiled. "You're being generous." "I'm being accurate." Melissa finished packing and carried her boxes to the rental car. On her last trip, she stopped at the door. "Harold, can I ask you something?" "Yes." If I'd been respectful from the beginning, if I'd asked questions instead of making assumptions, would things have been different? I'd thought about this question since the moment I decided to let her discover the truth on her own. "Yes," I said finally. "I would have helped you transition, found you a condo, helped with the down payment, made sure you landed on your feet. We could have grieved Ryan together instead of fighting over his memory. And now? Now, we can't. Not because I'm angry, the anger has mostly passed, but because I can't trust your motivation. Every kindness you showed me now would feel like it came from knowledge rather than character." She was quiet for a long moment. "That's fair," she said finally. "Harder than I hoped, but fair. What will you do?" "My mother's helping me find an apartment. I got a job offer in Denver, marketing director for a tech startup. It's less money than I was making here, but it's a fresh start." "Good. I'm going to try to be different, Harold. More curious, less certain. I'm going to ask questions instead of assuming I already know the answers. I hope you do. She opened the car door, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Ryan talked about you constantly. About how you built this house, how you designed satellites, how you taught him everything he knew about integrity. He was proud of you, Harold. Even if I was too blind to see why, I felt unexpected tears prick my eyes. Thank you for telling me that. It's the least I could do. I watched her drive away, then walked back into my house. My house, with Margaret's floor plan and Ryan's childhood memories embedded in every wall. The silence was louder than it had been in 11 years. No footsteps upstairs, no voices in the kitchen, no one to share coffee with in the morning or discuss the news with in the evening. Just me and the echoes of everyone I'd loved and lost. 3 months have passed since Ryan's funeral. I still live in the house I built with Margaret. The patents still generate royalty checks. The rental properties still produce income. The family trust still holds more money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes. Melissa sends occasional emails. She got the job in Denver. She's dating someone new, a man she met through work. She says she's trying to be different, asking questions instead of making assumptions. I hope she is. People can change, given the right circumstances, given enough reason. Last week, I had dinner with Ryan's best friend from college. He told me something I hadn't known. Ryan had been planning to tell Melissa the truth about our finances. He'd scheduled a meeting with our family lawyer for the week after the Tucson trip, the trip he never came back from. He was going to show her the trust documents, explain the family situation, correct 11 years of misunderstanding. He ran out of time. I think about that sometimes. The conversations we mean to have, but keep postponing. The truths we plan to tell, but never quite get around to. The assumptions we let stand because correcting them seems awkward or unnecessary. Ryan learned too late that some corrections can't wait. And Melissa learned too late that assumptions, no matter how confident, are still just guesses wearing certainty's clothing. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that quiet strength doesn't mean silent acceptance of disrespect. There's a difference between humility and doormat, between peaceful and passive, between kind and weak. I spent 11 years letting someone treat me badly because I didn't want to make waves. I told myself I was being patient, mature, above the pettiness. But really, I was just avoiding conflict. If I'd spoken up earlier, if I'd corrected Melissa's assumptions when they first appeared, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she would have seen me as a person instead of a category. Maybe Ryan wouldn't have felt the need to protect me by hiding the truth from his wife. Maybe not. There's no way to know now. What I do know is this. Respect isn't negotiable. It never was, and it never will be. You can't earn it by staying quiet. You can't preserve it by avoiding confrontation. You can only establish it by treating yourself the way you want others to treat you. If you're watching this, and you've ever been underestimated because of your age or your appearance or your quiet nature, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to remind someone that assumptions are dangerous? That the person they've dismissed might be the most important person in the room? Sometimes the best response to disrespect is simply proving them wrong, letting the truth emerge in its own time, giving people the opportunity to teach themselves lessons they refuse to learn from others. And sometimes, after the truth is finally known, and the assumptions have crumbled, and the dust has settled, the most powerful thing you can do is simply forgive. Not because the person deserves it, but because carrying anger is heavier than letting it go. Melissa was wrong about me. She was cruel and dismissive and arrogant, but she was also grieving in her own way, and operating on information her husband chose not to correct, and living in a reality she genuinely believed was true. I don't excuse her behavior, but I understand how she got there, and understanding is the first step toward forgiveness, even when forgiveness feels impossible. Ryan would have wanted that. Margaret would have expected it. And I'm old enough now to know that bitterness corrodes the container more than the content. So I forgive. I move forward. I live in the house I built with the woman I loved, surrounded by memories of the son I raised and the life we created together. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means selective about when to speak and what to say. And when quiet people finally do speak, smart people listen. Until next time, remember, respect is earned, not inherited. And the most dangerous person in any room is the one who doesn't need to prove anything at all. If you're new here, subscribe to Astral Vengeance. I share stories about dignity, strength, and the power of letting truth speak for itself.